Well, good morning and welcome back from our recess. This is our third day of the Strategic Planning Committee of the Whole, essentially budget. Today you'll probably notice a shift from the discovery and discussion around cost centers and more towards using the tools before us in order to create a balanced budget moving forward. As a reminder, all public meetings are live streamed and recorded. Any verbal or written information provided may be included in public documents as per the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, FOIP 40-1. I believe looking at our agenda, we start to move to the more closing parts of that, but ultimately this is the point where we review what we've done over the last number of days and find our path forward. And I will turn the floor across to Ms. Serhan to kind of outline where we're at the moment.
Absolutely. So when we started, these books looked a bit daunting, overwhelming maybe, with the amount of details that are in them. Each program and project giving you, you know, a description and numbers, and hopefully over the last couple days, you've got an understanding of how much time and effort it takes just to create one of those pages in these books. Staff make sure that they're getting the right work plans for the right time, for the best use of resources, and extending the life of our assets as best we can, as efficiently as we can. And that's the responsibility of staff, is to make sure that we're using the resources of Clearwater County as efficiently as we can. And throughout the year, no matter where budget is set, staff will find efficiencies, and that is how those surpluses come at the end of the year that can be allocated for future projects and smoothing those bumps in the road. How council can affect the tax burden. And when I say tax burden, I mean once a program or project gets added into the projects for Clearwater County, what happens is it takes the decision of funding that out of the individual's hands and makes it mandatory. So once a project hits this, it means that all ratepayers of Clearwater County must participate in funding that through their tax dollars. When the first fire truck was purchased for Clearwater County, and it wasn't Clearwater County then, 100 years ago, people gathered and donated what they could until they got the amount that they wanted. They were really involved in purchasing that. They were involved in using it. And over 100 years, this process has evolved. And what happens is that regulations get put in place and things like that can't happen anymore. So once it gets into these books, then they are required to fund it. So the best way that council can affect the tax burden or the mandatory funding that happens for the community is by taking programs out or putting programs in. And that's the decisions that council needs to make today. And fortunately, Clearwater County has made good decisions in the past, and financially there are ways to balance the deficit that's currently on the books for 2023. And we'll go through a few of those adjustments here in a minute, but yeah, I just want to reiterate that once something gets put into these books, then it becomes mandatory and becomes part of the tax burden for the ratepayers of Clearwater County. So thank you for my indulgence there, or indulging me. So at the beginning of Wednesday morning, there was a deficit that needed to be funded of $4.7 million, but there was an identified surplus in 2022 projected of $4.9 million. So one of the ways that council talked about moving that surplus from 2022 into 2023 to fund 2023 projects is by taking that fleet projects that were funded through tax revenue and assigning that surplus in 2022 to the Public Works capital fleet restricted surplus, and then withdrawing it in 2023 to fund those projects or pieces of equipment that were being funded through tax revenue in 2023. So you can see that in 2022, it decreases the surplus by $1,040,000 and increases the transfers from reserve to decrease the deficit in 2023 by $1,040,000. There were a couple other things that I heard as conversations happened over the last 2 days. So I just put them in here. It doesn't mean they have to stay here. It's just, what I was hearing as we were moving along. So moving the sanitary dumping station to 2024, moving the restricted surplus draw, and then subsequently moving the construction piece. So it doesn't really affect the surplus because that was, or the deficit because that was being drawn from restricted surplus. So we have to take the draw from restricted surplus out and then remove the construction. But then that moves that project and those internal totals of how much we're using from restricted surplus needs to change, and your overall projects for construction for TCA needs to change. So that's why the numbers are there, even though they balance each other out. Adding the Ridgeland Dry Hydrant for $50,000. Adding the ACP grant for the airport capital because we had identified $100,000 of construction for the terminal, but we had not identified the grant that the town had secured for $160,000 for South Clearwater County's portion would be $80,000 of that. This is the council fees that were put in error. Insurance premiums needed to go up $71,000, and this was just that investment income that if we wanted to move that because interest rates have gone up, and we can move that budget up to back up to $2 million in 2023. So if all those things are left in, the surplus for 2022 is projected at 3.8, and the deficit for 2023 is 3.2. Did I say that right? Get my years mixed up. Surplus for 2022, 3.8. Deficit for 2023, 3.2. One of the other things that you might not see in, give these back to Michelle, please. To Michelle. You may not have noticed is the, in 2022, there was to be a draw on the tax rate stabilization fund. And because there's a projected surplus in 2022, we would not need to do that. Oh, that's the capital books. So in your capital books, under the restricted surplus detail,
Page 21, guys.
yeah, page 21, starting there. Let me see. So the fund, the 2022 deficit from the stabilization fund is found on page 23. And it is for $1.5 million. So if we took that transaction out, that would decrease the surplus in 2022. And then you would have the full $10 million available to fund 2023, if that's of interest. And again, on the capital summary document, there is a list, capital funding sources. So that's the very first one on page 5. Oh, that's the summary document, sorry. Then we go into a little bit more of a detail on page 6, and you can see that tax revenue is funding $9,800,000 of your capital projects. The largest one being gravel road rehab of 4.8 million. But there are some of the other smaller capital projects being funded through tax revenue that we could assign surplus to in 2022 and then fund those through restricted surplus. For example, I think most of the ag equipment is being funded through tax revenue, and we could put that into a restricted surplus, that amount for 2022, and draw that out in 2023 to fund ag's equipment purchases through restricted surplus, and that would decrease your deficit in 2023.
Deputy Reeve Milhoff, please.
Thank you, Reeve. Are you able to go through kind of what from the MSI and gas tax and that kind of stuff has already
Sure.
been allocated? What is actually available for us to put onto projects?
Right, and
What's
some-
because
and
some
I
of
think with
staff is
MSI
already.
Some of the MSI money, if I remember correctly, has to be used by a certain period of time
Yeah.
too, and I'm just interested in
Sure.
knowing if we're approaching some of those deadlines, we don't want to go past our best
Right.
before date.
Yeah, we actually used about $15 million in MSI in 2021. So we did use up quite a bit of that back revenue. So there is no concern of hitting any deadlines within the next couple of years. You can see on page 8 that this is where the capital grant revenue projects begin. And in 2023, the AEP partnership, the fish passage, I don't know why I have such trouble saying that, is being funded through a specific AEP grant. The bridge file 78211 is being funded at $1.5 million through MSI. Oh, sorry, no, that's through the STIP grant. And then further down is the federal gas tax fund. We use asphalt overlay projects typically for federal gas tax fund. That is one of the projects that the federal government likes to see for that grant, and it makes it easy to submit applications and get approvals. MSI is being used at $8.5 million in 2023. So Quarry Road, $682,000, River Road grading, $350,000, Beaver Flat Road grading, $6 million of MSI, and the condor replacement of collection mains and curb and gutter at 1.3. There will be MSI available in 2024 and 2025 that we have not identified a project for as of yet. And then the next page is proceeds on disposal, and that's the skid steer trade-in for $102,000. And then the next are all the projects that are being funded through restricted surplus. Page
Yes,
9, yeah.
Page 9, please.
Yeah. And as you can see, most of the capital projects are being funded through restricted surplus already. So it's been identified that $33 million, $33.5 million will be coming out of restricted surplus in 2023 for the projects, and that's on page 13. There's a total after all of the projects are listed that are coming out of restricted surplus. And then on page 13, it begins with the projects that are funded through tax revenue. So a couple of the larger ones are the paving at the Public Services Building, the Nordegg Staff Housing, a portion of the Leslieville Rec. You'll see that a portion of it's being funded through the municipal rec and school fund, that dollars from developers that have to either pay or provide a green space get put into a restricted surplus, and there's a specific things that can be funded with that, and one of those is recreation. So the Leslieville Rec Grounds is a project that qualifies for those, so that would bring that current restricted surplus down to zero, and the balance of that project is being funded through tax revenue at $416,000.
Councillor Graham, please.
Do we have a document that we could pull up on the screen for going a little bit further back for restricted surplus? I'm looking at the totals in the restricted surplus here, and it makes me very nervous.
Sure, so
I'm just curious if they normally are dropping like that, or are we overspending, or because
No, actually,
I don't like to see them drop that much.
yeah, over the past several years, actually, they've increased. I think 2021 is the first year that the restricted surplus has dropped in about, 8 years,
Okay.
probably. So I don't have that information just handy to put it on the screen, but.
Okay, but this isn't normal to drop this much.
No, and the reason that it's dropping is because past councils have saved for the projects, and then for one reason or another, the projects didn't go forward in those years, and it's just 2021, 22, and 23 are very aggressive in the amount of capital projects that are being planned to be completed. So it is, maybe the numbers look a little, I don't want to use the word scary, but it does seem like there's a lot coming out, but those are projects that council has been planning for, and now these are the years that these projects are moving forward, and that's what that money's been set aside for.
If it's useful too, I can share that in my tenure of being involved here with Clearwater County, I've seen that restricted surplus rise from, I think it was about 77 million when first stepped into this chair, to a peak of somewhere north of the 100 million mark, and it's been ultimately we see that from time to time that money going out to work in a different way for our community, and sometimes it's sitting there in reserve waiting to meet those needs, and sometimes it's drawn down a little more heavily in one year in order to accomplish those projects. So that's the trend I've seen. It's been a trend where that has actually built over a number of years, if that's helpful.
I agree.
Councillor Graham?
I just am I like to see money in the bank kind of a person. And I understand we need to do capital projects, but in my mind, we need to cut some capital projects this year. And I might be the only one thinking that, but in these unstable times, it makes me very nervous. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Swanson, please.
If I could piggyback on some of your comments too, sitting in this seat for a little longer. We have to understand too, the province is watching all our bank accounts, and they're not going to give us grants if they know that we're just saving to save. They want to see us designate for future projects that they see as a priority in their budget as well. So whether it be paving roads or building the bridges or whatever else, or the broadband project, right? So if we don't have those monies sitting there to assist, then they're willing to come to the plate at the same time. So it's a bit of a two-way street. Yeah, we have to spend, but at the same time, we want partners to do these projects as well. So that's how it goes.
Thank you for that. Councillor Ratcliffe?
I have to share some of the same concerns as Councillor Graham. Do we have an updated version, or are there any changes to this four-year financial plan on page 9 of the operating summary?
Sorry, I missed your question.
Is there an update to the four-year financial plan that's on page 9 in the operating summary here?
The document that was on the screen, Trace, the one with my notes on it? Yeah, the Teams one, please. Thank you.
Councillor
Page
Ratcliffe.
9. It's just the very beginning of the operating. Not
Oh, of the operating.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
just,
I was
let's
dealing
move down to the graph. Oh, sorry, up, I meant. There, this is what you're asking about, Councillor
Yes.
Ratcliffe? Yeah, so that's the transactions. We don't actually update the numbers that are in the chart until after the decisions are made. So then just the transactions that are happening or that I've heard for changes to the document that's in front of you, then the totals will change down on the bottom. So let's move back down to the transactions, Trace. Okay, so right there. So these are the things that I've heard that that we may want to change that from the documents that are in front of you, and then it would update to the totals that are on the bottom there. You can see that's the new total for the surplus for 2022 and the new total for the deficit for 2023.
Okay. It just looks to me like we're living beyond our means. And, continuing to draw down reserves.
In the restricted surpluses are set aside for specific capital projects, and those capital projects are moving forward in 2023. That's why counties put money into restricted surplus is for specific projects. So when those projects move forward, then the restricted surpluses are drawn down. $33 million is what's projected to come out of restricted surplus, but there are funds going back into restricted surplus also for almost $5 million. So the net happening is under 30 million. It's 28 something or 29 something. Just let me find the net coming out is 29,921,000 because not only is $33 million going out, but there's $5 million going in for other capital projects.
Okay.
And Mr. Hagan has something to add as well, I'm sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with Mrs. Serhan's observations and would encourage the committee that the use of those restricted surplus funds is actually a good thing. It shows the diligence of council in terms of applying those funds. I think that looks good, not only to our constituents, but to the provincial government as well, that we're not just continually putting money away for someday. There are specific purposes these monies are being saved for, and we're showing that action, that they're being applied. What I would also encourage the committee to consider, though, is the funding. As Ms. Serhan has said, we're not funding as much as I think we should be. At a minimum, we should be trying to put as much away as we're seeing in amortization every year. Amortization is the decrease in value of our capital assets, or the portions that have been used up in providing services. And at a minimum, what we should be striving to do is put as much away as we see expire in a year, and then considering the effect of inflation and even topping up above that. Over the past few years, particularly with 0% tax increases, we've been shortchanging in terms of that future investment. That's really where the risk is planning for the future. And I would encourage over the next few years that council consider opportunities to continue to increase that investment. But I certainly wouldn't discourage the use of those funds that are there for those purposes. We shouldn't be afraid of putting that money into action. So it's really a balancing act.
Thank you for that. And ultimately, that balance is so important when we're looking at, I'll just say this, we've been successful in getting those transfer payments from the provincial government, sometimes from the federal government, even it's because we have a sound management plan around our assets. It allows the confidence of the government, the other levels of government, to support us in our efforts to maintain our assets and to build for the future as well. So it's important to show that we have a plan to replace those things as they wear out or depreciate over time. And I think we've been successful in finding that balance, and I can point to that success and as we receive that support from the provincial government on many aspects, whether it be MSI or the new LGFF in the future, everything that builds on the work we're doing here. I'm going to go to Councillor Northcott, please, and then Councillor Melhoff, and then back to Councillor Green.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My thoughts are similarly to Councillor Graham's, and I'll probably try and get this out smoothly, but I do realize that like a lot of these restricted funds were designated for projects, but my thoughts were that maybe at the time when those accounts were created, those projects might have been a priority then, but as time has went by, maybe priorities have changed. So to just ensure that those funds are being invested in projects that would have the most benefit for the residents of today, like maybe priorities may have changed. So I would probably be in favor of maybe postponing some of these projects. Just yeah, that's just my comments.
So maybe I would look to you. I know perhaps one of those things was mentioned in our discovery process was the Caroline North and South Road. I think a surfacing on that is that, and you being in one of the area councillors, is that something you feel is a priority, or should that priority be shifted to a later date?
You know what, that's actually a really good, I know that one was, I think Mr. Hansen had said that one, that project was pushed off to 2024. But on the topic of that road, is there plans for gravel to be extracted from the 2 gravel pits near Butte for the future paving of the twinning of Highway 11? And would that be why maybe the additional lift of asphalt would be placed on that road or that highway? Or is it just coincidental?
Mr. Hansen?
Good morning, everyone. This is right in my wheelhouse, and I'm glad. I always want to be here for this opportunity to discuss capital projects. We'll deal with that question first. I have not heard of the routing of the twinning for the base course or the asphalt. My desire and will be to focus them on primary highways. You know, that they can beat up their own infrastructure. If they're going to haul that volume, like we can only imagine the volume of material it would take to twin Highway 11. So we would definitely be focusing our efforts to make sure they're using primary highways to service that construction. The asphalt overlay is the desire is because it is coming to the end of its 15-year life cycle. We do know that there's some side slope improvement that needs to be done around that Butte Hill. We have that, I'm going to say, a soft slope on the west side of the Caroline North Road, and that has been deferred to 2024 because we really want to look deeper, do a deeper dive into Caroline's infrastructure deficit to make sure that we don't cover up something that needs to be fixed in the near future. But with that, when we're talking about capital projects in the priorities, and I know it can be daunting, I would like to actually crack open the 10-year capital plan with council and maybe go through it list by list, and I'll provide a little bit more from a priority from what the historic priorities that we've heard from council to see how, if they still line up with this group here today. Instead of trying to grab randomly, I'd actually like to start at the top and go into each category, and I'll give you basically a rundown from an administrative perspective, what we feel is maybe some little bit more history on why it's a priority, or maybe something that could be postponed. If that's council's desire, or if you want to just pick random, like, we can do that as well. I really look to the chair to see how you'd like to do that.
Well, I think the way you described an orderly process through might help with council's understanding a little more deeply of the 10-year or the projections forward. So
Absolutely.
looking to council, of course, if that's, I'm seeing some thumbs up and nods, so please, if you would, I think we'd benefit from that.
Perfect. So if we could bring up, as we have the 10-year capital plan, we'll start right into facilities. We're looking at the first three items on that list are the surfacing of the front parking lots in Nordegg, Leslieville, and Condor. I'm not sure. I don't have the page number on mine, I apologize.
So, yeah, no.
It's just the Public Works Infrastructure 10-year capital plan.
We don't have a translator for the page numbers, Wells.
Apologize, Mike.
105, Trace.
105.
105, yeah, in your books. No, in your books.
105.
In the capital
105
book.
in capital.
Yeah,
Okay.
page 105 in the capital book, Rick. Yeah.
Chapter and verse.
So when we're talking about the front parking lots of those three buildings, I can say that the Nordegg Public Services Building is a commitment from 2022 that really can't be moved. It's already a contractual agreement we have with the contractor. It was supposed to get in 2020. It was supposed to get done in 2022. That project is being carried forward, so that's basically on the books for 2023. What we can discuss though is the Condor Public Services Building and the Leslieville Public Services Building front parking lot paving. You know, those equate to approximately $720,000. It's self-serving in the sense that those are our facilities. It's a higher level of service that we would provide in our own facilities. If that was something that this council wasn't seen as a priority right now, I can tell you the discussions were before that once we start doing Nordegg Public Services Building, that Condor or Leslieville should be done as well. But do they need to be done in 2023? I would say no, if that was an option for this council. The other one, the Nordegg staff housing, we briefly had that discussion during early in my presentation, that those lots are set aside, reserved for county use. We do not have a current commitment for staffing in those, like a staff commitment for renting or a rental purchase or anything of that description. If that was something that wanted to be removed for now or deferred, we could do that as well. Just to round out facilities, and then we can have the discussion about facilities, I still think it's a very positive, prudent plan to move forward with our Leslieville recreation area. We have the soccer pitch, the baseball diamond. We know that we've lost those amenities through the construction of the new schools, and we have a really good concept plan to move forward. The funding's been identified as through the that municipal reserve, all that money that developers have invested over the years for recreation. We haven't done a recreation project in a long time. My personal administration's opinion is that it's a good project to move forward with. So that kind of rounds out facilities if we want to start the discussion there.
Yeah, a question relating to those, the paving projects or the public service paving projects. That's funded through tax, or is that funded through
That's
reserves?
funded, the Condor and Leslieville and Nordegg are all funded through tax revenue,
Okay,
as well as the Nordegg staff housing and 400,000 of the Leslieville rec area. So, one of the solutions, if you move forward with the Leslieville rec area, you could put 400,000 into that municipal reserve, and then draw it out when that project is completed in 2023, and identify restricted surpluses for the paving if you move forward with them or postpone them, and the same with the Nordegg staff housing.
So those, if there was a change in those, if they were pushed forward, then that would directly affect us on
Yes.
this year's balance.
Yes.
Correct. I'll go to Councillor Graham, and then back to the Deputy Reeve.
I would echo that the Leslieville recreation area is obviously extremely important to do. Those kids don't deserve to have no playground. And I think they've been extremely patient there waiting for us to put the playground there. Yesterday, I was very game for taking the Nordic staff housing out because we don't need it right now, but I also am concerned about the price, of what the price will do. I mean, it could drop, who knows what it's going to, likely not right now, but that's just something I was considering last night, so I just wanted to bring that. I'm not against taking it out, but I just wanted to bring that up.
And Deputy Reeve Melhoff, please.
Thank you, Reeve. In preparation for our own budget, I've been watching a whole bunch of other people's budgets throughout the entire province, because for whatever reason, we're all doing it at the same time. Crazy. And I think that we are in a much better place than a lot of the other municipalities I've been watching, particularly because we have not once in this entire conversation used the word debenture. How awesome is that? Like, how, that is an amazing position to be in. And the fact that we are looking, going, which savings account should we use for this? Not which bank should we call, I think is an amazing opportunity for Clearwater County. And it's showing the amazing work that previous councils have put us in to be able to say, hey, which account are we pulling this out of? And is this a priority for this team or not? Like Councillor Northcott had said. I think the staff housing is important, and just by virtue of the fact that if we don't use it, we can sell it because we're the developer, just like in Nordig, we're the developer for it all. And if we are expecting to change some of the makeup that is Nordig, perhaps there's staff that will be affected by that, and we need to ensure that they are still going to be able to be out there. I was looking at the different things that you had mentioned regarding Condor, Leslieville, Nordig, the public services buildings. We're doing those in conjunction with other paving projects so that we can get the best bang for our buck, correct?
That's right.
What does the county facilities budget line item look like? Is that for a future build, or is that for ongoing capital projects throughout our entire municipality? Just to understand what that reserve fund was built for.
That restricted
Since there's
surplus?
sorry.
Most of it has been put in for the administration building, but there are funds that have gone in there year over year from rental income. So anytime that there is the medical building, for example, we get annual rent for that, or the last couple of years, the lots that we've been renting out within the village of Caroline, that money is going into that restricted surplus. So there are other funds besides the funds that are being put aside for the administration build in 2028.
So there's an opportunity within that particular identified restricted surplus for potentially the Nordig, Leslieville, Condor paving projects as county facility upgrades.
Yes.
Is nobody else? Just a thought?
Mr. Emmons, please.
It is council's reserves. The intent of council of the day for that reserve was primarily in response to what they heard from the citizenry on the open houses for the admin building. The people of Clearwater County wanted it more transparent and wanted to see the account identified for that purpose. So back in the day, it was predominantly for that 2027 mark to save and be transparent to our citizens.
Thank you for that. And I will just say, I certainly agree with Deputy Reeve Melhoff that Clearwater County, in comparison to other municipalities, is in an enviable position. We have had a sound reserve strategy and asset management plan for many, many years. However, with record inflation, supply chain challenges, affordability issues throughout the country, we probably can't remain an island in that completely. So we will have to look at all the tools before us in order to balance a budget for sure. And also keeping in mind what's important to this council is to maintain those reserves. I'm hearing that as well. So we want to find the balance today. Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Okay, got a number of topics I wanted to speak on here. Did I understand that your suggestion that we could move the funds to begin the Leslieville Recreation Area and fund that from municipal reserve?
The portion that's funded through tax revenue, so there's 400, just let
Yes,
me.
but instead of funding it from tax revenue, we could do it from municipal reserve?
Yeah, the portion that's funded through tax revenue. So the portion that's funded through tax revenue is,
I think you said 400 and something.
So I think we use the entire amount for the MR.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, this is just to finish the project, like we will use everything that's in that municipal reserve. Oh yeah, here we go, sorry.
So if I could just, a little definition around that municipal reserve, that's those funds that when we create, when a development permit becomes before us, that we essentially charge the developer a fee, and then that's placed in this municipal reserve account, and that's built up over a number of years, and this is allowed for this opportunity to partially fund a project from that. Is that correct?
Yes, and past councils had actually put some additional funding in there in the case that there was fundraising happening for one of the schools, and that was to match that. And so it's not all required to be spent on green space, but that is some of the money that's in there is for that for sure, but council had put additional funds in there. And the amount of that Leslieville rec area that's funded through tax revenue, once that restricted surplus account is drawn to zero, is $416,235.
okay, so I misunderstood that we could fund it, for all of it from municipal reserve.
Just because there's not
There's not enough there.
not enough there, yeah. But I mean, if we put money, if council chose to top that restricted surplus up in 2022 with the surplus that's projected in 2022, by that 416,000, then council could choose to draw that 416,000 additional out of the restricted surplus, and that would affect your deficit in 2023 in a positive way.
Can I continue?
Let's check one or two off your list, and then we'll allow other councillors to speak to that
Okay,
as well.
regarding the staff housing in Nordegg then, I think moving ahead with that would let us start to clean up some of the trailer park area. Am I mistaken? That would show movement in being able to move ahead with that area of Nordegg, the Nordegg development. So for that, unless I'm mistaken on that, for that reason, I'd like to see it go ahead.
Mr. Emmons?
That is a component of it. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And then
Step back.
I will come back to you as well. I think, I'm sorry, I'm gonna go to my extreme right, or to Councillor Northcott first, and then back to you, Deputy Reid.
Alrighty. I would be in favor of supporting the Leslieville Recreation Area. I think the infrastructure would add to the quality of life of families and residents in that area. But I would be cautious on the paving of the public services buildings, where there's 3, 7, 8, 9, close to $1 million worth of paving there. I don't know what the benefit, like for the dollar figure for the benefit. especially in the economic times. And then also the staff housing, I don't know if I could support that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the lots are there, but this would be to purchase 2 mobile homes, right? So if there would still be the option to possibly sell those lots. And if somebody wanted to purchase a mobile home to put on there, that option would still be available, but not to spend the $450,000. So that's my comments.
And Deputy Reeve Milhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. Can you give me a little bit more insight into the restricted surplus fire dash facilities?
There is funds going in there annually of $150,000, and at that rate, it would take a long time to replace a fire facility. So
this would be for a full replacement of a fire facility, not necessarily a capital upgrade of a fire facility?
Yes, I believe that's what it was intended, but of course, council can choose to.
So there might be an opportunity to have some of those, the public condo or public services building, less of a public services building paving, some of it, understanding that it's not entirely a fire hall, it's also a public works building, having some of it come out of there if we so chose.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, and I think I've seen that particular restricted surplus leap up when there was a project coming forward in the past.
Right.
And that's a place where those, sometimes the allocation of unrestricted surplus to a restricted surplus was done into those as we were trying to meet a project moving forward. One thing I would say, and around delaying the process around paving of the public works, as I understand there is still ongoing paving happening in both those communities, and probably some efficiencies in mobilization perhaps when paving is done in the area, and it may not be the same budget line coming forward in a year, just because I'm sure there would have to be some consideration of additional costs. Maybe Mr. Hanson could speak to that a bit.
No, absolutely, Mr. Chair. Like, whenever we look at any of our projects, whether it be paving or, you know, we're constantly looking for efficiencies, and the paving of these parking lots is no different. Absolutely, you know, even when we're looking at the construction of our public services building, you know, we present council options to say, you know what, if we wanted a 5-bay, it's this much. We want 3, it's this much, and then ultimately it boils down to, you know, what's the comfort level of council. We're constantly looking for ways to improve efficiency, maximize efficiency in a year to year, and these aren't any different.
Thank you, and I would just share, you know, having been part of making decisions in the past, sometimes in looking in the rearview mirror, we understand that with that benefit, that maybe there were points of time that we should have done something differently. So we always have the benefit of looking in the rearview mirror and understanding that there are additional costs to be borne in the future by not acting now as well too. So I just want council to be aware of those kind of concepts. Where are we at now? Let's go to, I haven't heard from Councillor Cermak yet, so I'll go to him and then I'll back to Councillor Ratcliffe.
I think I counted 23 projects we have in 2023. Do we have enough people to supervise all of these projects properly so that nothing goes astray before we start cutting and adding or deleting? Do you feel comfortable that you can do all of these projects?
Well, thank goodness I actually just acquired a capital projects coordinator as per the budget, hopefully approved. You know, adding that resource there will greatly increase our capacity. You know, and the individual that's coming over is already well versed in these projects, so I'm confident with the workload that we've presented and what will be coming, is that it's going to be a busy year. They typically are, but I haven't seen anything come across for a workload yet that would make me concerned that we wouldn't be able to get that work done. A lot of these are done through contracts, you know, and a lot of these programs are actually already tendered, awarded. You know, like say we have all of this Nordeg paving there, that's already been awarded. The project manager's in place, the contractor just needs to show up, so. Beaver Flats Road, it's a large dollar amount, but there again, the project manager's in place, the contractor's been selected. So once we actually compress it down to what we have left, I think we're in really good shape for next year for our ability and our capacity.
Okay, thank you. One more question?
Absolutely.
I find all your numbers and everything fantastic, but when I look at a project, let's just say, the Condor Public Service Building, the total cost, it would be really nice that you don't separate everything out into their cost centers. I mean, you have to do that for the books, you have to separate them out into their cost centers, I can see that. But could we, or me, or I, if I could just have a total on that project from when you break ground until it's given and handed over to the residents to use, that is the cost of it. Because I keep flipping through all these pages because you do the dirt work, it's this money in this cost center. And in the contract for putting in deep utilities is another one. And in shallow is another one. And in graveling and the paving and compaction is another one. I find it really confusing for me. I don't know if the rest of them, maybe my brain doesn't get around it like most people, but I would really like to have that so that I know the total of a project, not that it's 4,000 this year, 2 million next year, and 4 million the year after.
I can appreciate that because I think you've probably found in your experience as councillor, quite often people will ask you a question, well, what's something costing us? And you can think back to one portion of that, but you may not remember and do the arithmetic to add them all together. So if you have a number, a big round number in your head, that's something you can help the public understand.
So it's not only me that sees this difficult.
If you want to look through my notes, you'll see lots of places where I've added up a few things just to get a concept of whether something's $4.4 million or actually 8. That's kind of where I do, and I've got used to that process, but I can appreciate where you're coming from.
I'm talking about a newbie to this, or a virgin to this whole thing, so I just wanted it kind of laid out a little bit different, if possible, without putting too much burden on administration.
Mr. Emmons, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Administration will see what we can do. Under the general accepting accounting principles, it is laid out in according to accounting legislation. So we're kind of bound by what's capital, what's operating, and where it belongs. We have no control over that. But administratively, we will see if there's other things we can do to try and accommodate.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Thank you for that, Councillor Cermak. That brings up one of the items on my list is, and I'm still trying to understand how all these different costs go, but you know, we have some really large numbers around our fire service. It would be interesting to see the whole cost of that if we're paying utilities on those buildings out of another account, you know, then we're not seeing the entire whole cost of operating the fire service. So unless I really misunderstand how this information is presented, it would be useful to have it in that perspective as well. And can I carry on?
Sure, and then I'm going to go to Deputy Reid Melhoff after another question.
Okay. I agree with Councillor Northcott about paving the parking lots at those public service buildings. Reading the justification for that, it seems that you know, the county itself is the majority of the traffic around those buildings. And I think I would have trouble explaining to a taxpayer why we're spending 700,000 plus on that. Although I believe it's also tied with paving the Leslieville East Road. So, which I think we should continue with. Would there be another opportunity to pave those parking lots with more paving in the area down the road?
Mr. Hanson?
Down the road, yes. It's not uncommon that we still always try to group similar projects together. Leslieville, for example, in 2024, if approved next year, we'll be looking at doing an overlay in the hamlet of Leslieville. So, you know, it's not a far shot to the Leslieville Public Services Building as well as the Condor Public Services Building. Similar type work, you know, we'd always be looking for those types of efficiencies, and unfortunately, paving is one of those things that's not going away. You know, we have 356 kilometers of paved road in this municipality, and it has a life cycle, so we're going to be continuously paving always something. We can always group projects together, get the best pricing. This one's just been identified as that we do have similar, we have projects right in Leslieville, on Leslieville East, right in front of the doorstep, as you would, of the Public Services Building. We are doing the inlay for the curb and gutter there in Condor. You know, the Public Services Building that's going to be the closest paving that there is for that project. So there is a great efficiency to do those projects then. Not saying there can't be efficiencies in the future, because as I said, it's not far from Leslieville if we're doing that next year. There again, we always look for the best bang for the buck of the year or the best opportunity. So it's really up to this council there, and it seems rather split on who wants to do, whether we could do those this year or not.
Okay, that's my feeling on that.
Okay, I'll go to Deputy Reed Milhoff.
Thank you. Is the pavement going all the way to the new rec area that will be built there? Is that Resource Road being paved at the same time as the Public Services Building?
No, the original plan, actually, we were considering paving that road, but with the amount of construction that we are going to be doing off the end, we wanted to defer that there again to 2024 to be added to with there again paving in the area for if we're going to do the hamlet in 2024, get the earthworks completed. That way we'll actually, because we basically have the road in place, just randomly stopping at the end of that property. We know that the tie-ins have to happen when we do the grading to construct the soccer pitch and the baseball diamonds and the parking area of that. We wouldn't want the paving to be right over on top of that construction work. So that was the idea of actually deferring that for an additional year.
Okay, that's fair. Can I ask
Please.
with regards to doing, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. You mentioned, Ms. Sarhan, you had an ag suggestion with regards to equipment. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that? Sorry, I only wrote ag/suggestion, Ms. Sarhan. So if you could dig into that again,
It was
that'd be
just
great.
one of the ways to show that anything that's being funded through tax revenue in 2023, there could be a surplus transfer in 2022 to fund that in 2023. So one of the ones was all of ag's fleet purchases are being funded through tax revenue. We could have a transfer to restricted surplus for that total amount in 2022 and withdraw that in 2023 to fund those projects, and that would decrease the deficit in 2023.
Do you have a rough estimate of what?
I don't, but I'll work on that.
That'd be great, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, you have it, okay.
305?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Okay, great, thanks. Thanks, Councilor Graham.
And I'm going to go back to Councillor Swanson, please.
I guess for me, part of the risk of deferring any paving project is the cost of the product. And if we believe that the price of oil is going to be up in the next couple of years, that will affect the price of whatever's coming. I mean, yes, it still goes to a tender process because we haven't contracted that out, but we risk that if we wait till 2024 or 2025, that we could be paying double what could be happening now. Or we could be paying much less too. It just, where do we feel where the world's going? So, I know myself, I don't believe oil is going down. I'm for if they're going by, especially for dust mitigation and everything else that has for quality of life within those particular areas, it's like, if we've got it now, let's do it now. And, but that's where I'm at. And as far as staff housing in Nordegg, for me, if there's no one there that's gonna occupy it, I'm willing to defer it to 2024. And if we do have people that are there, it's just a matter of coming back to council this year and say, we've got people that we can fill up and go from there. To me, that's a quick decision at that point in time.
Councillor Cermak?
Yes. You said earlier that we have projects already have been awarded, bids have been awarded, and the projects are to go ahead in 2023. Can you give this list so that we can stroke those ones off so we don't have to talk about them? Because they're already going out and they're finished and we want them done.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So doing the quick list on if they're again looking at the 10-year capital plan, you can strike off the Nordegg Public Services Building.
Okay.
Come down to grading projects, the Beaver Flat Road.
Okay.
Asphalt overlay is the Stewart Street. Moving on to Quarry Road, base pave.
Quarry Road?
Yeah, under base pave, Quarry Road.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And then moving into Nordegg draft development plan. So Nordegg Historic Commercial Core. The Phase 1 Manufactured Home Park. The Nordegg Lower Stewart Street Commercial Core. I think that's all of them. Yeah. So that encapsulates all the paving in Nordegg, basically, except for the addition, what I discussed with council, that covering up that the new phase 2 of the residential. But that's also included in that is the shallow utilities. No, the list should be good.
I'll go to Councillor Ratcliffe and then to the deputy.
Thank you. So that's 7 projects that were bid and we're committed to.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to look at these things from a few different perspectives. Could you confirm my figures for me, Ms. Saran? Mm-hmm. In 2022, we had a capital budget of just over 60 million. And we have projected surplus of 3.8.
Yes, a projected surplus total before any adjustments was 4.9.
Okay. I did my calculation on 3.8.
Okay, that's fine. That's after the $1 million for to fund the fleet purchases from 2022 comes out of there.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, so we've budgeted a 15% or more than 15% surplus.
That surplus is not coming from the capital projects. That surplus is coming
Oh,
from
Okay.
a variety of reasons, and I'll bring up. I couldn't speak to it right this minute, but I will bring up the report and I can update you later on this morning
okay.
where that surplus is coming.
Because I'm just thinking that our shortfall is less than 15%.
Yeah, you could use the entire surplus in 2022 to fund the deficit in 2023.
And I might just comment, I appreciate the work that staff has done to kind of tie down those numbers. Typically, we've gone into this stage of our budget and not had that kind of level of certainty what the surplus could be. So I really appreciate the work that staff's done to create that as a discussion point here today, having more certainty relating to a surplus.
Yes, the directors have done a fantastic job of estimating the projection to the end of December 2022. However, it is still an estimate.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm going to go to Deputy Reeve Milhoff, please.
Thank you, Reeve. Not having the fire chief here to speak to this, I'm going to end up just going on my own historical knowledge of the fire service. Paving, these are fire halls, they're not just public works buildings. Having pavement to train on is huge. You're not spraying gravel on your equipment, you're not kneeling on gravel, you're not breaking glass into vehicles, and then it going onto gravel, trying to pick up glass. You can sweep it up, clean it up, it goes away. Like, there's numerous efficiencies to be found by having pavement in your in your fire halls. I understand that it's a hang up for some. The efficiencies that are being found by the paving going right past there, I believe is a positive, and I don't see asphalt getting cheaper. I just don't. I could be wrong. I just don't see asphalt getting any cheaper. And what was your saying earlier? Cheapest time to build something is 10 years ago or today. So I see a need. When is our next fire hall slated to be built? If we were to look into the future, in our current municipal setup, when is our next fire hall slated to be built? Looking at the fire facilities restricted surplus.
I don't think any of us will be alive for that. Mr. Emmons, please.
I won't be. No. I believe Clearwater County has done, council has done an amazing job looking after our fire halls with our current infrastructure. We currently are in, I would say, an enviable position with our fire infrastructure. If I had to project, I would say probably 60 years.
I would be comfortable in looking towards the fire facilities restricted surplus to fund a portion of the Leseville Condor paving projects for the public works buildings.
I think I probably feel I should, or feel led that I should comment too about the importance of that apron area or that staging area around a fire hall. It was always part of the consideration when these fire halls were built, was delayed essentially because when you have construction and disruption of that area, that you want to allow for some settling and re-leveling of the grading and runoff and all those great engineering considerations that are there. So I can understand why that wasn't part of the initial build, but I think it was always part of the ultimate concept of those buildings being truly public works and community, as well as a fire service area. Ultimately, that staging area in front of the building is extremely important as well. So it seems like a big number, but sometimes we have to absorb those and move on. Councillor Northcott, please.
Thank you very much. 60 years, that's a long ways away for a fire hall. Just for the demand in the southern portion of the county, in the county that is placed on fire services. Is there a possibility, or how do you create a restricted surplus account of some sort for a future fire hall in the southern portion of the county?
Council, of course, could do that. Currently, that's under partnership, but council could always create a reserve if it's chosen.
Thank you.
All right, so we've discussed a number of potential ways to ease the number in our budget here. Haven't reached a full consensus yet, I don't believe. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, when I was talking before about budgeting a surplus, I wasn't suggesting that we use the 2022 projected surplus to fund 2023 shortfall, but that assuming that there's a 15% or more surplus budgeted in the 2023 capital numbers, that we just reduce that amount and take out the budgeted surplus or part of the budgeted surplus.
The capital projects aren't budgeting for a surplus, and that's not where that surplus comes from in 2022. The surplus, I was just reading some of my notes here, and some of the surpluses, like for example, there was $1 million budgeted for bad debt expense that we don't think we're going to use. So, and 6% savings in salaries, but it's hard to, mostly due to some vacancies. So you don't want to take the budget out of a specific program thinking that that is where you might have a vacancy. You budget for a full staff complement, and then at the end of the year, there are likely some efficiencies that staff, that either because of circumstances beyond staff's control or efficiencies that staff actively look for throughout the year happen, and then the surpluses happen in that year mostly through operations. The capital surplus is just if there is a savings on a capital project, it is typically coming from restricted surplus, and then it just decreases the amount of money that comes from restricted surplus. It doesn't actually go into the bottom line surplus that operation efficiencies do.
Okay. So we don't separate capital or operating surplus?
Yes, we do, but capital surpluses aren't, savings aren't really attributed to the bottom line surpluses. So what happens is if there's a savings on one of the projects that's funded through restricted surplus, then if it was budgeted to be 600,000 and we only spent 550, then that 50,000 would stay in that restricted surplus fund. It doesn't get brought down into the bottom line of being a surplus to be accessed for future.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and I think if we look back on the budget process over a number of years, typically we have balanced the budget without using that projection of a surplus, and then at some point in the future, allocate that overall surplus to our restricted surpluses at some point. So it's little change in the process here today. I think more transparent in some ways of how we're doing that. Let's take 15 here, and we'll be back at 10:30, please. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing on with our budget discussion here, and I forget where we left off, but maybe look to staff if they had any thoughts after the short recess.
Christine, could you bring up the Teams spreadsheet, just? Okay, yeah, go to the Teams, yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm just gonna make one small adjustment here. Okay. So, just, of course, none of these are permanent, it's just some of the suggestions I've heard, so please tell me to remove any of these if that's the choice. So, the Leslieville Rec project, there's $416,000 coming from tax revenue, so we could fund that through surplus in 2022 and withdraw it in 2023. Paving for the public services buildings funded through fire capital, restricted surplus of $700,000, and the Nordegg staff housing from facilities of $450,000. So that brings your deficit to 1.7 million so far.
And Councillor Graham's light is on, so I will go to her.
There were a couple of little ones that I kind of spotted over our break here that I would like to bring up to change. The storage bin council room, it's only $15,000, but could we change that from tax revenue to the county facilities restricted surplus? Would that fall into that?
The storage bin cam room, 15,000?
Yeah. It's on page 14.
Yeah, I see that. Is that an ag project or?
It's for the for the storage of the pesticides in the ag building.
Okay. So we could, the other one was to fund the ag capital through surpluses in 2022, so that would be included in that. 305?
Oh, that is part of that?
No, I'm wondering, you give.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so.
I don't remember. I did that a few days ago.
Just one question or comment around the staff housing in Nordegg. My understanding that's a manufactured or mobile home type unit, and I imagine the actual construction phase of that is relatively short, but you would need time to be able to order those things, the lead up time to some. I'm just trying to grasp the project. If it was delayed a year, would there be, is it a relatively short-term project, or is it something that would be happening over a period of months or weeks or years? I'm just trying to understand that project.
Yeah, we predict that this would be a relatively short turnaround from an ordering, basically once the budget meeting minutes are approved, once that process happens early in the first meeting in the new year, the following day is when we start placing orders for trying to fulfill the obligations that we set out. 365 days is not a very long time to try to get all this work done, so we start right away. Whether it's an off-the-shelf type construction, if they had one, we might go for that option if it had to be constructed. I don't imagine that these manufactured homes have that big of a turnaround. The suppliers that we got the prices from, they were even hoping to actually have even a better pricing come the new year, but we did want to budget conservatively. And then, of course, putting it on a foundation, which is likely to be just a pile-driven foundation. All the utilities are there, we just have to tie in, so it would be a relatively quick turnaround on construction.
So I guess my thought around that is, so since we haven't described an immediate need for that, that if we had a need that arose throughout the year, there would be some potential to still complete the project under some level of contingency to meet a immediate need. Would that be a path forward on that as well?
Absolutely, and I'd be really, I'm hard pressed to even figure out how an immediate need would even arise from a staff perspective. You know, if, Nordegg is, we do not have the commitments from the staff that are already there. That's where we start. If something were to change in that, of course, then we could, but I'd be hard pressed to find out what an immediate need would look like. We could just, we'd budget for a following year or this year or whatever council would like, but we can certainly, we would be able to move it on in a short notice.
I guess I just share my hand is that I believe that's something that could be pushed off into a future date, and yet we'd still have some options if we had some level of contingency that required that. We could still create a solution. Councillor Graham, please.
Mine's not related to the housing, if that's okay.
Okay, no,
Okay,
for sure.
I think that you might be right, Mr. Han, I think, because I have a sticky note on it, so I think I did include that. The other one that I was gonna suggest was the landfill site security fencing, $75,000. Would that be appropriate to put into the facilities restricted surplus?
We could move it from 2022 into facilities and then take it out in 2023, is that what you're suggesting? Or just have it come out in 2023?
I don't know. I don't understand.
Do you want to use the surplus from 2022 or just what's already in restricted surplus for facilities?
I was thinking what's already in it, but
Okay.
whatever you think is appropriate. I'm not a guru on this, you are.
I think it is important, sorry, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, please.
That we do distinguish, the numbers we are seeing up there is that, what Mr. Rand's actually proposing is like there is a significant surplus that's been identified in there as a funding source for some of these shortfalls that, basically you just take the left number, looking at the right number, that is one option to balance that, to get it to the straight line, right? Just as long as everybody has a good clarity of what funding sources are available. So that's one. And of course, there are the restricted surplus reserves that we've got to not use that word reserve. Restricted surpluses that we can also use to fund these projects as you see fit. It really depends on the comfort level or maybe even what the goal is or what the desire is to try to accomplish. Do you not want to bring down the restricted surplus schedule as much, then maybe it's more appropriate to use the surplus that's been identified from last year. Or if that's not the concern, or if you have something else earmarked for that surplus, because that surplus will have to go somewhere, maybe just kind of break down that conversation in your own mind there to figure out what the priorities are.
Thank you for that, and definitely we understand that there's priorities, all important projects, all have been identified as priorities before, and that's why we're seeing them come forward in the budget. Ultimately finding that balance, I know I heard today that it was important to maintain our reserves at a certain level and not draw them down too much. I think we're in an enviable position right now of being able to balance the budget, but I think I should probably mention another way to balance the budget is, of course, as many other municipalities have done or are forced to do, is to create more tax revenue. That's done through a process as well, but it is one way to balance the budget. The other potential there is we do have a tax stabilization account, which allows for us to moderate those changes that our community sees as we move forward as well, yet still maintain our future plans and our present work plans as well. So that's just some of the options before us. Deputy Reeve Melhoff, please.
Thank you, Reeve. So I was just at gravel road rehabilitation, and that's all coming predominantly out of tax revenue.
Councillor Graham, if you.
Sorry
you
to
may
interrupt,
have a-
I gotta leave if we're talking about this. so
Oh, sorry, I
I'm
was
so
like,
sorry.
I'm like, what did I do?
No,
Fair
we'll allow that, we'll allow
And I
that.
was looking over at Public Works Capital, and it's seeing here that there's not anything coming out of that particular account. Is that restricted account designed for something different?
That's the one that actually, Public Works Operations will be utilizing for their large, purchases. It's on one of my, to-do lists is to make sure that we're identifying that appropriately in the future years. I know, Kurt's done his own, analysis, and he feels that restricted surplus account would be at a zero by 2028 or something. 2027.
So for what type of purchase? Sorry, because the vehicle and equipment one is above that, and we'd already talked about that one. So which type of,
The larger
Works.
equipment one, I think.
there's a different vehicle and equipment one. Right above it, vehicle and equipment at 8 million.
Okay, let me see.
Public Works Capital's at 1.8, and then projected to be at 4 million by 2025.
Oh, the transfer that's going in there is for industrial land development, excuse me. Industrial land development.
Okay, so this is designed for industrial land development?
Yes.
So we couldn't pull
Right.
from that fund for
You could change
the
it
gravel
if-
road rehab program?
Yeah, you could change it, but, that wouldn't be sustainable because we are doing a gravel road rehab program year over year for the same dollar amount. So that one is appropriate to be funded through tax revenue because it's the same kind of dollar amount every year over year. If you wanted to use it for that for 1 year, and not have the industrial land development as a priority, that's of course, your decision, but.
Like, I'm just going down this and seeing where
Yeah.
tax revenue is the funding source and seeing if I can find an appropriate
Yeah.
source here to match to it.
I just maybe wanted to draw your attention to the restricted surplus draw from 2022, so if we take that out,
Oh, I think your mic's still down. We want to make sure that
Hey,
those following at home can hear
Yeah.
our conversation as well. So.
Should we bring Councilor Greg back if we're moving away?
oh, yes.
Yeah, I think we
yes.
can,
Sorry.
I'll go and see if well, actually, I can't do that. She's right here. She's Johnny on the spot, so this is good.
So, yeah, we're moving, if we take that draw out, because the surplus is large enough to, not require that draw from the tax rate stabilization, so that, restricted surplus would stay, at the $10,398,000 level, so you would have that whole amount available to use. And that's one way past councils have funded, the deficit at the end, especially when they have a surplus in the year that, the current year, they put that into the tax rate stabilization and then just draw out of, the tax rate stabilization, the amount that would be required to fund the deficit in the following year. So in this case, you could put the $1.5 million into, the tax rate stabilization and then pull out the 1.3 in 2023 to fund that deficit.
Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
In the operating budget program summary, page 138, corporate services, it says that there is included an additional 2% raise in tax rates. Is this already reflected in these numbers?
Ms. Sirhan?
Thank you. Yes, so there's a 3% assessment increase that increases the tax revenue, as well as a 2% overall revenue increase, so, for tax revenue. So yes, those are both included in the tax revenue number.
So a 2% tax increase is assumed already.
2%, yes.
What if we change the industrial levy to, say, 3.5? Would that put us out of line with the rest of the world? And what would the impact be on the bottom line?
Mr. Hagan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I can assist with this. It's really too early to start talking about tax rate changes specifically, and particularly amongst the different rate classes. Council will have that opportunity in the spring once again the assessment numbers are finalized and firm. And then we bring a draft tax bylaw before council. Then those options can be explored because we'll have better, more solid information for you to base those conversations on. So when we say 2% tax increase right now, we are not saying tax rates are going up 2%. What we've built into these draft budget numbers is an assumption of a 5% increase in property tax revenue in total. Our initial estimates of assessment values that'll be used for the basis of the taxes for 2023 is telling us we think 3% of that 5 will be made up through assessment increases, leaving potentially up to 2% to be made up through adjustments to tax rates. But it's premature to know what those specific adjustments are going to be at this point. So I would suggest, for the committee's purposes, focus on that 5% number overall. How comfortable is the committee in that assumption of a 5% increase? We believe it's consistent with what we're seeing amongst other municipalities right now who are wrestling with inflationary pressures as Clearwater County is. And I think it is probably a more global discussion at that level as opposed to specific tax rates at this time.
And again, I think I said it before, Mr. Hagan said it very eloquently, that we do see around us a number of municipalities that are considering sizable rates, or tax rate increases. So we're factoring this in with this budget that, you know, those may be options that we explore it when we set the tax rate in the future. Deputy Reeve Melhoff, but I think I'll go to Mr. Emmons first, if that's okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be prudent to point out council's working diligently and very close here. What isn't assumed in this budget anywhere at this time is any type of market. Administration is recommending a 4%, given what's happened with the world economy and our neighboring municipalities, but that number has not been built into this budget.
And that was going to be thank you for bringing that forward. That was going to be the next thing I introduced as well, as a concept of something that hasn't been addressed with this budget either. I'll go to Deputy Reeve Melhoff and then maybe some additional comments.
Thank you, Reeve. Mr. Hagan, I'm a little bit confused because if we're not supposed to be making any assumptions on tax rate, why is a 2% assumption in this budget then? It's confusing for me.
I can appreciate that. Let me try and break it down a little bit further. We're not specifically talking about tax rates or specific changes to tax rates at this time. We're talking at a higher level in terms of tax revenue. So in looking at the challenge of balancing this overall budget and all of its individual components, being operating expenditures, capital investment, contributions to restricted surplus for the future, all of that in that bigger picture to come to a balanced number overall, we're recommending a 5% increase in that tax revenue number. Without that increase, if we hold tax revenue static, then it creates other challenges for this committee to find those funding sources elsewhere. And given the pressures from inflation and so forth, and the fact that we believe on preliminary estimates that assessment values will provide 3% of that, we're suggesting that the committee consider a 5% increase, again, at that global revenue level, exactly how that's gonna pan out into impact on tax rates. If our assessment values were actually to come in higher than 3%, it's less of an impact potentially on tax rates. But it's just too early, and we don't have enough solid information yet to say exactly what the impact on tax rates will be at this time. So I would really suggest try and keep at that higher level of the gross dollar value of tax revenue itself.
Thank you. Can I ask a follow-up?
Yes, please.
So, Ms. Serhan, you mentioned that account, the tax stabilization account, will be at 10,398,000, or was it 89? 98. I remember in previous strategic planning conversations, we discussed that we were wanting to cap that at 10. So I would suggest that the 398 can already be reallocated to 2023 without much debate, or I would hope it would be, because we'd already debated it once before.
So anytime we set a cap, that is an approximate number, is it not? Or do we immediately shave the dollar off the top of that?
Just trying to use it as an opportunity to.
No, I hear you, and I think we always want to be cognizant that the intent of that stabilization account is to cushion those changes we see from year to year and hopefully moderate the effects of our community in the process. I don't think there's anything we can do through efficiency, through trimming and streamlining our management practices that will really isolate us totally from what happens around us, and we were subject to what's happening in the world. So that is a great option to be able to have that tax stabilization account in order to balance our budget at some point in time too, without cutting away what we believe are important services. So thank you for that. Councillor Graham. Oh, sorry. Ms. Serhan, perhaps, and then I'll go to Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I'll just confirm that all restricted surplus transfers need to be approved through council decision. So even though there might be approximate caps that are identified through policy, staff would still not have the authorization to move that money without council approval. So the fact that it's sitting at 10,398, it would still need a council decision to bring it down to 10.
And I'll go to Councillor Graham and then back to the Deputy Reid.
I just need some clarification. I think that I missed something somewhere. The stabilization fund in mine is just over 8.8 million. Are we putting some more in? I just missed.
So that's just removing the draw from 2022 that we had budgeted of 1,500,000 because there is surpluses identified in 2022 that would not so then we would not require that transfer from that account in 2022. So if we take that draw out, it leaves that account at 10,398. Plus there's an additional surplus of the 1.5 in 2022 that could go in there, and then you could just draw out that 1.3 or plus whatever market adjustment council decided on. Yeah.
Deputy Reid Melhoff, please.
Thank you. I would, like I said, I would recommend for sure the 398. I know you said you needed an official thing, so unless anybody is saying that that's not a good option, for sure the 398 to come back out of that.
Call it
400, yeah. Round it up.
Well, and you don't necessarily have to define that as the only amount. That may be what this committee chooses to balance the budget with. Ultimately, I think we have a number of options here. It's just which one we choose. We don't have to be checking the chairs and the couches for spare change in order to do this. We are in a good financial position that we can balance our budget. It's just how we choose to prioritize our projects and at the moment. So. And Councillor Ratcliffe, please.
Are we legislated to have the same tax increase across all revenue sources? Or can they be different?
I would turn that across to the staff. I have an opinion on that myself, but it would be just that.
There is a legislated ratio for the tax rate for industry versus residential. So the industrial tax rate cannot be more than 5 times that of the residential tax rate. However, Clearwater County is well within that ratio.
And just maybe for the benefit of the committee, do we have a number where we're at within that ratio right now? I don't think we're bouncing even close to the limits of that ratio.
No, I think we're right around 3 times.
And I think in the past, we've discussed doing, councils or committees of the past have discussed altering that ratio and decided, I think, that it has some effects on industry as well. And it also has sends signals and messages to industry as well if you're bearing down on those industries for a greater portion of the tax burden. That can be met as anti-economic development too. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as well if we consider those things.
What would the impact be of changing that ratio from 3 to 3.5?
As far as the amount of tax revenue,
Yes.
I'm not sure. I would have to do some calculations.
Councillor Swanson, please.
I love this discussion this morning because we're squirreling off here and there, and it's good to hear. I love the questions. Just looking at what we have, I guess for me to, I'm okay with the projects that are outlined. I guess I would pull back the paving from the public services building from the fire capital, and I'm fine to take it through the surplus, like put it back through the surplus, plus the 900,000, and we'd be pretty close to using up our 1.5 surplus at this point in time. We'd be pretty close to zero.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm having a little difficulty getting used to unwrapping the Christmas present a bit early. But it is very useful in this exercise, understanding that there is a surplus that can be directed to our activities in the upcoming years as well. So that does make, as Councillor Swanson suggested, the balancing of the budget much less painful at this moment. Who's next here? I think Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. I might also suggest that the fiber to landfill scale house is coming out of tax revenue, 150,000, and I would suggest that comes out of the broadband restricted surplus.
Mr. Hagan?
Appreciate the suggestion. A couple of concerns with that. One, this is not directly related to the broadband project itself. It's taking advantage of the broadband project and the work that we've completed to date.
Okay.
This is actually a project we would undertake no matter who owned that core backbone that happens to be in the vicinity. So this is really a Clearwater County information technology initiative to improve our access to our own network. So taking it from the broadband reserve may not be appropriate as it's designated for the broadband project itself. And as well, noting from the schedule of restricted surplus, we're projecting to pretty much deplete that reserve in 2023. So there's really not much available there.
Okay.
We could identify some of the surplus from 2022 to fund that.
Okay. And Councillor Northcott.
Just a couple comments on a couple more line items here. the Nordegg Industrial Subdivision. Maybe not to cancel it, but is there an opportunity to maybe push that for a year for that investment for the $3 million? And the other one that I had was for the Leslieville East Road for the paving for the additional $4 million on that one. Would it be a possibility to push that off for a year?
Mr. Hanson or Ms. Serhan?
Yeah, you know what, really, we need council to be in support of our capital projects and what we're trying to accomplish. You know, the funding, we already see two problems with if we're trying to solve a problem versus are we not ready to do a project like that. So the Leslieville East Road, for example, is funded from paving reserve, so we'll do nothing to the bottom line here. What it would do, it would defer it for another year or be canceled if that's council's priority. The Nordegg industrial area, there again, that's coming out of the do from account in Nordegg. So there again, won't do anything for your bottom line here, but if this council wasn't comfortable with moving forward that project, you know, that's a different discussion. So there's anything at the will of council can be done. If the desire is to try to balance the budget, neither of those projects are going to do that for you. But we can happy to have the discussion with the rest of the group there, even included that about those two projects.
Follow up, please.
The reason I bring it up is just the trend of funding to municipalities from the Alberta government, and is that a downward trend, or is it because those funds might be set aside for those projects, but in the future, would they be able to be reallocated to something else if it was in higher need? And if there's a downward trend in funding with the economy and the debt that the Alberta government has, that's I'm just proceeding with maybe a little bit of caution that if those projects don't have to be done, and in the future there is funding that is needed for something else that's priority, then just to allow that one more year just to be cautious. That was my mindset on that comment.
The restricted surplus for the paving could definitely be reallocated if that's council's will. The Nordegg Industrial project would be looking to sell the lots to recoup that. So if we didn't do that project, we just wouldn't have lots to sell. So there wouldn't be an opportunity to reallocate any funds from that project.
Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. As far as the Nordegg industrial lots, I already have people asking when they can buy them. So I would love them to be ready now. So pushing them a year, I don't necessarily think is in the best interest of that area. In fact, the fact that we're a municipality and therefore our development is already slower just by virtue of the process of governance puts us at a disadvantage to developers that don't have to have the governance structure that goes with developing. So I would really love to see that program continue to progress. And in fact, if there's any more that you can speed up like you did last year, let's do it.
And Councillor Graham.
I just wanted to touch on the Leslieville East. I think won't be surprised where I stand, seeing as that's in my division. I think that paving that is a big asset when it's a growth hamlet, and we want to draw people to the hamlets. I believe that road being paved is a big asset to be able to do that and potential to expand the hamlet. I also think that it's great to allow more accessibility. I know my husband doesn't like me driving on gravel in our truck, and I know there are other people that don't like driving on gravel, and it kind of ties that in for all the people coming from Withrow and from the east to be able to go there instead of having to go north and head back west and potentially going to Eckville instead. So I think it's beneficial for the businesses that are within Leslieville as well.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson?
I agree with Deputy Reeve Melhoff in regards to the Nordegg Industrial. I think that's critical. Anything, to quote Councillor Cermak, well, let's strike while the iron's hot. So I think that's where we got to be on that. And it's a cost recovery. That's the way I look at that, like Mr. Ann has identified. In regards to I believe, Councillor Ratcliffe is looking for efficiencies on the operating side versus the capital side, correct? I'm just trying to find my mindset with you, or, you know, with this, because at the end of the day, you know, these restricted surpluses, we can consolidate it all into one fund if we wanted to, but it's nice for transparency's sake of how we've got it broke down. So, you know, I can remember there was a Nordeg fund that we've restricted surplus that had been sitting there for 10+ years, and we finally just said use it up. So, and the same thing for the North Saskatchewan River Park. You know, we had money sitting there for umpteen years to do the, you know, the improvement at the highway. So those, it's nice to identify those projects in the coming years. So, so with that, we're looking at, you had just mentioned, Mr. Rand, that we could fund from the tax stabilization. What was that last one?
Yeah, so this is just your your suggestion there with taking the 2022 surplus and funding. This would bring the tax rate stabilization to 10 million then. So put it 910,000 into it in 2022 and having 1,310,000 coming out. That's the difference, is that 398,000 that's above the $10 million. So yeah, and then your deficit is at zero but without the market adjustment yet.
So then we could allocate the surplus when we get those final numbers, the 640,000.
640,000
left. And put that into any restricted surplus that we want, or restricted
yes.
account we want. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Emmons, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to share additional information with this committee for consideration. When talking about the Lesaville East, the other component of that conversation was school division and their consideration of the location of the new high school. It was a consideration with our partners when they were looking at that proposed site for the safety of their school buses, identifying it within Clearwater County's capital. Just wanted to bring that as consideration when looking at all the projects as well.
And Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Reeve. And I know it was past council, but I believe there was a grant that helped do the base paving of that project from the province, which may have played a role in working with the school division as well with those granting options. So this hasn't fully been on Clearwater County's shoulders when we did receive a grant, if I'm looking back in previous council's history.
Mr. Hanson?
Yeah, brief history lesson. COVID funding that was coming out of the province there. They were looking at a stimulus program. The county, the previous council had to submit an application for projects, and it had to be a project that wasn't currently budgeted for in the year that it was previously programmed for. So we'd brought a bunch of options to council at the time for different priorities, and Lesaville East grading base pave project, because we know that, you know, good construction practices, we do the grading year or two prior to paving, but it was sold as the program as a grading base pave. We had to provide that information to the province there for economic development, our red tape reduction strategy, and we were successful in that grant. So basically the grant paid for the entire grading portion, but the project was sold as a grading base pave project. But the only thing that we didn't do was expedite the paving. Otherwise, we would have done that in 2022 because the grading was done in 2021. Council opted to leave that in the paving of that road because it was already in the paving plan. They chose to leave that in the 2023 year. So that's a little bit of the background on that.
Please.
Thank you, I appreciate that. How long should base pave sit, or can base pave sit, prior to it needing an upgrade when you go to pave it anyway? So there's probably some efficiencies to be had by doing the base pave and shortly thereafter doing the pavement. Otherwise, why do a base pave?
Yeah, so, terminology is a little bit off there. So the grading, we do typically a year, prior, we let it settle. And then base pave is actually the base course gravel and then the asphalt over top. So we would only ever do a surface gravel there the year prior. And then once we get ready to actually do an asphalt surface, that's when we put the base course down there, which is, like say a 300 mil structure, and then the ACP, which is the asphalt on top of that.
Okay.
So it always, good practice is to construct, you know, your base the year prior, the substructure, and then do the base course the following year or years after.
And then pavement.
Pavement would
So
happen with
there's
the
a
base pave
three-step
is
process.
it's a two-step process.
Oh,
So
okay.
when I say base pave, that's a single process.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
And
Thank you for the
It's
clarification.
my understanding that allows any technical difficulties that arose through a freeze-thaw cycle to be able to be mitigated before you have that finished surface, and ultimately that should create a longer-lasting project and better efficiency for our community. I think, let's go to Councillor Swanson, and then to Councillor Cermak.
Going back, COM had mentioned that we haven't added to this particular line item, the market labor rate.
Yes.
So, I'd like to see, what that looks like at 4% in that, if we could add that, as recommended. I believe that, we are in times of where retention is critical right now with a lot of stuff, so I think that that's important that we look at that and offset the inflationary rates too that are happening. So we could put that in, that would be awesome.
I think I'll just comment that a very important concept that Clearwater County has embraced is reaching that 65th percentile. We figured that's an optimal place to be to balance efficiencies and retention of that staff component that we think is important. So that's been something we've been striving to do, and in order to do that, you need to anticipate where the economy is going, and I agree that an increase, like you mentioned, is probably where we should be discussing at the moment. So I appreciate if we can see what that would add to the budget.
Yeah, so in the, a 4% is 640,000. And there's 640,000 projected surplus that hasn't been allocated.
So, yeah, there's $305. $5.
Can we shake it out of your coat?
Yeah. I'll find a couch somewhere to hide it for next year.
$305 surplus.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not finding it, that's the surplus.
Yeah.
More candy for the parade, because we keep running out. Last summer we were good, but we ran out again this last time. More candy for the parade.
Councillor Cermak, please.
Yes, mine's totally off the line that everybody was talking about. Great to hear that we got it all solved. I have one question, and it is to do with the landfill site security fencing. We don't do that. Does that not open us up to some liability there of stray animals getting on this site? I think that's a provincial jurisdiction.
We've just been joined by Mr. Magnus, the appropriate director.
It is a requirement as set out by Alberta Environment Parks approvals. So yes, when we get those approvals, there are certain regulatory requirements associated with it, and you are correct, Councillor Cermak. Fencing is one of those, so it does need to be done. Yes.
That needs to go ahead.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. It can't be stricken out of here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Graham, please.
I just changing the subject back now. I just wanted to say that I support Councillor Swanson's recommendation with the market Market
adjustment.
adjustment, thank you, adjustment. I agree that it's important to have quality staff and that improves everyone's quality of life, not having people incapable of doing the job. I just wanted to voice my support for that.
Any additional comments around that? Now that did create, we're still at a balanced point with what we've discussed so far this morning. Additional points or comments?
I think we did it.
Yeah, I think we have a finish line in sight. Councillor Northcott, please.
Thank you, Reeve. Just for the creation of these restricted surplus accounts, I know that there was a survey that was done in the southern portion of the county for a seniors housing project. Is it possible to create and if there's, to be able to create a restricted surplus account for that? There is, to be able to fund that maybe sometime in the future. I just wanted to ask that question.
And I would look to staff, but of course, I think we can, as a council or as a committee, we can define where we want to place any of our unrestricted surpluses into, or any annual surplus there might be into whatever we decide. Once you do, I think you need to define a project at some point in time in order to do that as well. So we're kind of maybe on that one, maybe we're in process there, understanding what all the challenges with that will be as we move forward. Councillor Melhoff, please.
I'll happily weigh in on this one. I don't think we should be building restricted surpluses that are designed to build infrastructure in another municipality. That's infrastructure that's going to be built somewhere else. I don't think our savings accounts, for lack of a better word, should be used to be saving money to build in another municipality. Now, in a few months, in a couple of years, if any of those things change and any of those positions change, perhaps it's a completely different conversation. But the way that everything is laid out currently, putting a savings account to build something in another municipality is just not something I have an appetite for.
Thank you for that, and I'll go to Councillor Northcott, please.
Thanks again, Reeve. The reason I asked for the just the thoughts on the account, it would be for the benefits of the Clearwater County residents in the southern portion of the county. So that's it.
And just comment again. Of course, we live in a dynamic, growing community. All those challenges have to be met as they approach us. And ultimately, the transparency we've chosen to do is to assign restricted surpluses based on a future project or a future need or an anticipated need. And I think as we go down that road, we will build restricted surpluses to meet those needs as they're defined, sometimes in the near future, sometimes in the more distant future. So that's my thoughts around that particular item. Ms. Serhan, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to also bring up what the annual transfers to restricted surplus currently are. So you can see the list there on the screen is West Country Road transfer. That's from policy direction for $300,000. Fund commercial industrial land development of $1 million. That's that Public Works restricted surplus account. Fund gravel reclamation. It's changed based on what is actually generated as a surplus on projects that we use gravel inventory on. Leslieville Sewer is the revenue above what is collected above the expenses to operate the Leslieville Sewer. Facility rental income, there's about $200,000 that we generate in rental revenue. Facility construction, that's for the new build in 2028, $1.5 million over 10 years. Capital equipment for Public Works, $150,000. Fire facilities of $150,000. Fire apparatus was bumped from 700 to 800,000, and an ag rec facility, $500,000 annually. And the only operational type transfer is to fund the the aerial photos for GIS, so 70,000 a year. And then in the third year, the fly is done, and then that project resets again, and 2 years goes in, and the third year it comes out.
Deputy Reeve Melhoff.
Thank you, Eve. As I said yesterday, I'd love us to dive a little bit deeper into the public work capital equipment. Some of that equipment is just as much, if not more expensive than fire apparatus, and I think that and hours/years out prior to what fire apparatus typically would with their life expectancy. So I think that we need to be putting more into that public works capital equipment account annually, so that we're in a better position in that account going forward. We've done the due diligence on the fire side. I think is important to do it on in that account as well.
Agreed.
Okay. Additional thoughts, questions? Again, our reserves are really part of our long-term picture of how we manage our assets. That's really part and parcel of our asset management plan, is having those funds in place and being able to manage and moderate the year-to-year effects of sizable purchases or line items that come up, and really isolate ourselves from a huge shift from one year to the next. All right. Looking to staff, we have found some balance within our projected draft budget. What are our next steps then? Mr. Hagan, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by saying how impressed I am and pleased with the conversations that have taken place over the last few days and the appreciation this committee has shown for an understanding of the impact of decisions around service levels and how that impacts operating costs, how decisions around capital investment affect operating costs and vice versa, and all those interrelationships. The appreciation for decisions around future investments and the funding that will be required to go forward. I think this puts this committee in a very good position going forward into 2023 in terms of strategic planning, and provides a very solid basis. I don't see this as a culmination of an exercise. This is really the beginning of the next cycle into strategic planning for 2024 and beyond as we start into those meetings. So thank you so much, and congratulations on what you've accomplished through this exercise. What I would suggest to the committee is consideration of motions that will support council in approving the operating and capital budgets for 2024, as well as the 4-year financial plan and the 10-year capital plan going forward. As we discussed on the first day, the broadband committee will be making separate recommendations to council for broadband operating and capital budgets for 2023. What I would suggest is motions coming from this committee would focus on the balance of the budget. Now, having said that, I'm sensitive to the identification that councillors have made, Councillor Graham, Councillor Cermak, in terms of other particular areas that they may not feel comfortable voting in a whole envelope of a remainder of a budget. So the committee may want to consider maybe divvying that out. So for instance, I think it was gravel road rehab was an area, Councillor Graham, that you had pointed out. You may prefer the committee to pass a motion saying, let's have the committee recommend to council approval of the budget for gravel road rehab. Then you can choose to recuse yourself from that vote if you want to. Then you could have a separate motion on the balance of the budget, excluding broadband, excluding gravel road rehab, excluding any other specific items where there may be sensitivity. And I think what that will provide is opportunity for the individual committee members to make a choice as to where they may want to recuse themselves and not end up in a position of conflict they're not comfortable with. Does that make sense?
I think so, and I would certainly look to those councillors that feel they may have that as a consideration, if that's important, and to the rest of council, if we believe that's a path forward or that's something we should consider as far as our motions. I'll go to Councillor Graham first.
So every single project should be singled out that I have to recuse myself for? Is what?
Can I?
I'm gonna need some time to write a list if that's the case.
And
I've made a note of every one that you've recused yourself from.
Okay.
So
perfect.
if the committee so chooses, they could make a motion to recommend the amended budget to council, and staff would develop motions between now and December 20th with the different totals for each of the items that we would separate out, and then bring that all together to show what the four-year financial plan would look like. But staff would put those programs together in separate motions for the December 20th council meeting.
Okay. I apologize for the extra work, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Melhoff, or Deputy Reeve Melhoff, sorry.
Thank you, Reeve. I personally don't feel that that's entirely necessary. They've recused for the conversation, for the discussion. And maybe I'm misinterpreting, but I don't necessarily think that level of then digging in on the overall recommendations is necessarily needed. Perhaps I'm wrong. The recusing happened during any of the conversation where any decisions could be skewed, but maybe I'm wrong. That's just my thought.
I'll look to the remainder of council to chime in before I chime in mine. Councillor Cermak, please.
Councillor Graham, I have to accuse myself from rehabilitation of the gravel roads. I wouldn't feel comfortable voting on that.
So what this committee would be doing is giving a recommendation to council, which would be brought back at a later date, where staff can create a series of items that can be divided out so that this committee can do a recommendation, I believe, without dividing everything out. But when those actual formal motions go through, then I think it's important that you have the opportunity where you feel led to recuse yourself, that there would be an opportunity there. We want to ensure that you endorse as much of this budget as you can in the process. I could say there might even be something in the budget that I would need to recuse myself from as well. But ultimately, I love the discussion around where we're at. Certainly, I don't know if we need to quite walk on so many eggshells from time to time, but I can see it being important in light of where the path we've walked over the last year or so. I think it's important to make sure that we create those opportunities to divide certain aspects of this process. Councillor Swanson, please.
I can appreciate the little nuances that that could be perceived from all this. But at the end of the day, we're still at a governance level. We're still responsible for the amounts that are being spent. And with those decisions that we've made at the table, I think it's good practice to be at a best practice. So yes, it does create a little bit more work on your end, but to me, it's dotting I's and crossing T's. And it's not just for us, it's for future councils as well, so.
Any additional thoughts or comments? So kind of what I've heard is as we move forward in the process, there needs to be some ability to section out parts of our motions relating to the draft budget. But I think for the purposes of this committee, it can be one recommendation. Am I seeing a path forward that way, or do we need to start that division right now? Okay. Ms. Serhan,
I think the committee can just make one motion, and it'll be, staff will pull apart the motions that may be of interest to be voted on separately, and then it will be up to council to decide how they want to move forward with that, but making sure that there's still a 4-year financial plan with all the totals in it, so that you'll be able to see that on December 20th. And yeah, no, just one recommendation from this committee will be fine.
Okay. All right, that's great. Councillor Swanson, your light's on.
I kind of scratched a draft motion that the committee as a whole recommends for council the 4-year financial plan with amendments for the December 20th budget, or for the December 20th council meeting.
Okay, discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I call that question. All those in favor? And those opposed? That would be carried.
Thank you. I too appreciate all the work that's gone into the last 2.5, 3 days, and I know that it on the first day or the day that you get your packages, it can be a little overwhelming and a lot of information to go through, and I just really appreciate the level of engagement and yeah, the amount of work that got accomplished this week so that the work plans can move forward in 2023. Thank you.
Any additional comments? I believe we're approaching the end of our agenda. Any opportunity for comments? Go ahead, Councillor Graham, please.
I just wanted to thank staff. These binders, like you say, it's daunting when you see them, especially last year, it was very daunting. But then when you open them, you guys explain every project so well, and they are so comprehensive, and it's just so well laid out, and I appreciate all the work that you all put into it, and you guys do an excellent job, so thank you.
Additional comments? I'll certainly echo that. I think this process has been one of the more enjoyable budgets I've sat down with. I think we have a potentially very good year coming ahead of us. And thank you so much for being so well prepared for this process. I think that has went as smooth as could be imagined. And thank you again to council for participating in an incredibly good discussion and debate about a lot of issues. And I think that's reflected in what we're going to present to council come the 20th. So I appreciate that. Any additional comments before I look for a motion? Mr. Emmons, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess on behalf of staff, we really appreciate the acknowledgement, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's been a good year. It's been a pleasure, and I am very happy to be sitting in front of this council, and I look forward to the challenges coming in 2023. I feel confident because we have an awesome team, and I truly believe that at the governance level and at the staff level. So it's going to be a challenging year. I'm a little bit worried for Eric. He's going to be, but thank you all very much.
And with that, I believe that brings us to the end of our agenda. Item number 13 is adjournment. I would be looking for a motion to that effect. Councillor Northcott, any further discussion? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Great. Thank you so much to everybody, member of the public that joined us over the last 3 days. It's been a marathon, and again, we look forward to your comments and feedback at any time as well. So please include those in correspondence.